A Selke Trophy chase for Eriksson Ek. 50 goals for Kirill Kaprizov. We take a look at some very bold predictions for the Minnesota Wild as the 2023-2024 season is upon us. All that and more on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked on Wild.
That's right. Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. And in the case of this episode, your second listen of the day as well. We are your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Zach Zeman joins us as we throw out some bold predictions. And we'll take a look at some other things that could potentially happen this season. And I'm going to dab some hot sauce, depending on the level of spiciness for particular things that we discuss on today's show. As always, my name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. And as mentioned, triumphant return to the Locked on Wild airwaves for Zach Zeman. Zach, we had a chance to go through the October schedule, and now we're going to crank the heat up a little bit by going through some predictions for this Minnesota Wild season. Before we dive into the predictions, I want to get your thoughts on what you think we will see from this team for the season overall. Is this a playoff team? Is this a team that is going to avoid the slow start that they had last season? What do you think we'll see from the 2023-2024 Minnesota Wild?
Yeah, I think this is a newer team than last year. I feel like there's a breath of fresh air almost. I think bringing in Pat Maroon, re-signing, Foligno and Zuki, like this is a new team. I think it's nice to see that Kirill's got the A now. It seems like there was missing puzzle pieces last year, and they're all kind of figured out now. People are locked in, no pun intended, for the next couple of years. And I think, the Wild have a tough month that we just talked about and tough first month. But I think that, compared to last year, they didn't get off to a hot start right away. And I think it's essential for this team to do that. And I think this could be the year where the Wild can make a name for themselves. I think they're a playoff team. The two teams that scare me are Dallas and Colorado. I think those are the two well-known central leaders. Dallas is on fire. The Wild put up with them in the playoffs last year, so let's not forget about that. But I think that it's going to be an insane year. A lot of new faces and a lot of fun. I think Gustafsson and Fleury is going to be fun to see. I think now Gustafsson's got that first spot. Fleury, sitting a little bit behind him, but I still think I do like Fleury this year. I think that having a solid tandem is obviously a great recipe for success. I always turn to the goaltending when I'm like doing these like predictions and stuff. And I think that it's essential. I think Fleury is great. I think if he has a great year, this Wild team can contend. Give Colorado a run for their money. I think Dallas is just there. But the Wild to make the playoffs. I'm excited. Are you not?
I'm very excited because I think we are seeing a lot of transition in the Central Division. The Nashville Predators, for example, made a ton of moves in the offseason. They subtracted a bunch from the equation. They added a bunch to the equation. So you're not really sure if that's going to turn out the way that they hope it did. Of course, you've got Chicago with Connor Bedard. How competitive can they be? The St. Louis Blues are kind of in the middle. And so it feels like a Minnesota Wild team that once again is going to hit that third spot in the Central Division. Now, does it end up being Colorado this year that they match up against, or does it end up being Dallas? Mm-hmm. Personally, I think Dallas will win the division, which means that it'll be the Colorado Avalanche that the Wild would theoretically play in the first round of the postseason. Obviously, these next 2 years are all about the Wilds trying to just wring out the last bit of these cap constraints, courtesy of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. And once those contracts are finally off the books and the buyouts is all that's left, then in theory, you could see the Wild making some moves as needed. But it's a team that it feels like, with all these other teams doing a ton of addition and subtraction, the Wilds did what they wanted to, which was to lock everybody up and keep that continuity going through the course of these next 2 seasons. It's a playoff team. I don't think there's any disputing that this is going to be a team that reaches the postseason once again. Are fans greeted then with another first round exit, or is this the season that things finally click and they end up getting to beyond the first round? That's the big question this season. Obviously, the development of young players, another huge piece to this. So there's going to be a lot to watch and a lot to keep track of as the season unfolds. And so it's just about kind of what you want to see this team do. But I think there are certainly a ton of ways that they can achieve, the goals that, say, general manager Bill Guerin sets aside, head coach Dean Evison. Obviously, they're thinking postseason. But if you can see some glimpses from Marco Rossi, you see good things from Brock Faber, if you see Kalen Addison be a steady contributor as well, those are ways to check the boxes in terms of was the season a success as well. So I think there are a lot of ways to define what this team will be about, but I think this is a team that is very, very much looking forward to getting off to a better start to avoid that panic button that we had last year. 0-3, 20 goals allowed. It was just hideous. And so they're trying to avoid that while also trying to have a ton of fun out there with new Kirill Kaprizov.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to a lot of transition in the Central, and I think the Wild don't have a lot of that. I think we're going to see a lot of the same team we saw last year. What's interesting to me is a lot of people tend to forget the whole first round exit stigma that surrounds the Wild. It's true, but this team is still contending with several $1 million down the drain to begin the season. And, it makes me wonder, what this team is going to look like in the next couple of years. There's obviously not a lot of expectations this year for the Minnesota Wild. Obviously, they're a playoff team. Can they get past the first round are the two biggest questions. Can they get past the first round? Can they contend a little bit? Can they stay can they hold a win in the series? They've been up games in these first round series, but they just blow it every time. So it's and they're still doing it regardless of the salary cap that's that's in place. And I think that a lot of people tend to overlook that when it comes to playoff time, and I get that, but this team is still contending. There are teams who have way more money to spend than the Minnesota Wild, and they're finishing way behind the Minnesota Wild. So let's just think about that. I think this team is great. There's a lot of jumbly teams in the Central. The Wild can definitely fit into the playoffs in this division. Colorado, sure. Dallas, sure. But those are teams you can contend against. And I'm totally all for that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how things play out. Obviously, there will be some things that will shock us and surprise us that will happen this season. There will be some things that we expect to happen that just don't. That's the nature of sports, is that outcomes are not entirely predictable and can lead to one thing or the other. And so we're going to try to heat it up with some predictions coming up. And I'll drink some of this hot sauce, this habanero pepper hot sauce. The spicier these takes get. And so please, for the sake of my mouth, let's not get things too crazy. No, yes, let's. We will dive into some bold predictions for the season as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. The NHL season is finally here, and the Minnesota Wild are hoping to have the season we have all been yearning for. Look, me, Zach, everybody listening, we all love the NHL. And I know that you are going to love the Sleeper app as well. The Sleeper app is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network, and it is my go-to spot for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can also win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy. So whether it be putting Kirill Kaprizov in your lineup for opening night, whether it be going with Philip Gustafsson as your starting goalie, whether it be picking Matthew Tkachuk or other Florida Panthers players, you are trying to optimize your lineup so that you can cash in big with Sleeper. Make sure you use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you benefited from therapy at any point during your life? It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself, and it isn't just for those who have experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNHL today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNHL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topol and Zach Zeman hanging out. We're going to get to some spicy predictions. And Zach, the way we're going to do this is I'll throw something out. We'll determine if it is attainable or not. If it's attainable, it gets a lower spice grade, obviously. Medium, mild, medium, or spicy. So if it's, for instance, the first one that we'll throw out here, Kirill Kaprizov getting 50 goals. That's pretty mild because I think we assume that that is pretty attainable for the Wild this season. So I'm going to assign that a mild grade. Do you agree?
I do agree, and here's why. I think last year, Kirill played 67 games with 40 goals. The year prior, he played 81 with 47 goals. And I'm telling you, with the A on your jersey, you're a different human being, and I think that 50 is attainable for him. This is a huge year for Kirill Kaprizov. Absolutely, I don't even know where to start. He's got that A. He's a leader now. This clubhouse, this locker room, everyone in the state of Minnesota rides Kirill Kaprizov. He's up there with Justin Jefferson as the best Minnesota athlete, of the decade. Let's even say, I think Kirill Kaprizov is that guy for this team. He got the medal on his jersey every single game now. And I think that 50 goals is attainable. And he's him. I don't even know what else to say. I don't think I need to say anything more. I'm not sugarcoating any of this. Kirill's him, and he'll get over 50. Guarantee it.
Yeah. I think it's pretty much a shoo-in. It's like Justin Jefferson getting to 100 yards or 1,000 yards in a season. Royce Lewis, when he plays a full season, hitting 30 home runs. Anthony Edwards averaging 25 points a game. It's shoo-in stuff.
Yeah.
And
disclaimer: this is if he doesn't get injured or misses any games.
Yeah, obviously, if he plays the full battery of games,
his potential is through the roof here. This is his year. Yeah. Let's just put that out there. This is his year. This is his year.
Yeah, and I think he's going to have a dandy season. So
Definitely.
We'll put that mild because it's probably going to happen. Now, one of my favorites, I think, that I've heard recently is the potential for, now that Patrice Bergeron has retired, so he's not going to win the Selke Trophy every season. What about Joel Eriksson Ek being a finalist for the Selke Trophy this season? Mild, medium, or spicy?
I think it's spicy, but I will say he's the one who didn't get the A. What if he comes with a vengeance and proves something to this team that he is a Selke finalist. He'll prove me wrong. You got the hot sauce on the camera ready to go here. I would love it. Why not? I think X got something to prove. He's obviously a great hockey player. This team, an absolute staple to this franchise right now. He's developed really well over the last few years. It took him a little bit, but he's there now. And I think that, the more the merrier. The more the years go by, the more he goes up. And I think that the Selke Trophy's a finalist is pretty spicy, but hey, I'm all for it. How does it taste?
It's a little hot. But I think this is spicy. I like it though, but I think this is definitely a spicy take. And that's not to say that Eriksson Ek can't do it, because I kind of think that he's going to take what happened with the grief line last year, where that got just blown up and sent off for parts. I think he's going to take that a little personal. And I think we're going to see him really ramp up his defensive numbers this year. Matt Boldy has taken that into his own consideration as well, and is starting to learn that side of his game too.
Right.
I think he could do it, but there are so many guys that are going to be vying for Selke Trophy consideration. Mark Stone, if he ends up playing the full season, will be one that will be in the mix there. There are a ton of guys that are just adept defensively. You even got a guy on his own team in Marcus Foligno who is capable of winning that award too. So I don't know that he'll be a finalist, but I think we are going to see a resurgence for Kirill Kaprizov this season. Okay, so that was the spicy one. So we got Kirill with 50. Mild, medium, or spicy that the Wild end up getting 3 more 30-goal scorers in addition to Kirill Kaprizov this year.
Oh, well, I will say I think one of them is Matt Boldy. I think he had 31, I think, last year. He played 81 games.
Yep.
He's for sure one of them. Do you have one more?
I think Eriksson Ek gets it.
So then we're thinking of one more. Hartman, maybe? He got paid? Is he going to
Hartman's capable.
Up? Right. So, I mean, one of these first liners, like the guys who get the most time, are you going to take it or are you going to leave it?
No, I got to go spicy with this one. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a ton of guys that get 20 goals.
Yeah.
But beyond Boldy and Eriksson Ek hitting that mark for the first time in his career, I don't think they get a third.
So yeah, Boldy finished with 31 last year. I do think. Oh gosh.
Oh, second one was way more.
If you're listening on Spotify, I'm so sorry because you missed the most hilarious facial reaction.
Yeah, this is going to be an A+ YouTube episode.
Dude, it's like, what in the world did I just look at? I completely lost my train of thought because no. Oh man, no, I do think Boldy's going to get like over 31. I think he can have an outstanding year. I'm like one of the biggest Boldy fans out there. Boston College days. I mean, absolute legend there. Let's go. I don't know. I think Boldy and Ek and Kirill, maybe one more, maybe Hartman, maybe Zuki. Who knows? Maybe not. This is why it's spicy. I wish I had hot sauce.
Yeah, I'm going to do it to myself again. Special teams has been a huge focal point of the offseason. New power play penalty kill coach in Jason King coming into this season. The Wild were middle of the pack on the power play and 10th on the penalty kill this last season. Zach, mild, medium, or spicy, a top 6 power play and penalty kill unit this season.
Spicy. I don't even know why. I just like, I honestly, I don't even know like how to back that up because top 6 in both is insane.
Yeah.
That's like insane. And there you go. You just took it out there. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Oh, hey, that reaction was not as bad. Maybe it might happen. Who knows?
I think my throat just is numb now. I think it's used to it by this point. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, thank you, Yucatan Sunshine habanero pepper sauce,
Sponsor us.
for coating my throat. I talked about this in yesterday's episode, actually. The Wilds were at 82% on the penalty kill. In order for them to jump into the top 4, they need to improve by 3 percentage points.
So you lose Dumba, you have Faber. That's like probably it. You're out with Spurgeon the first couple of weeks. This is where the questions happens, is because like when Spurgeon's timetable,
Yeah.
can Brock Faber do the Brock Fabering that he did in the playoffs? And then like I don't know. Is there any other questions? Can you stand up? Like, can we? I don't know. Is there like any defensive questions on special teams?
I mean, it's just going to kind of depend on what the pairings look like for the penalty kill. Like, do you go Brodin and Faber and then Middleton, Goligoski for your penalty kill pairings? That could cause some problems. Not to hit the alliteration over the head, but that could cause some issues. And the penalty kill is always, you could be going on an absolute run, like 15. How many times we saw like 2 or 3 times this year where the Wild were like 20 in a row.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they give up 3 power play goals in a row and your percentage just plummets.
That's just stats being stats. Like everything's going to come back down to the middle or to where it belongs. So
I think top 10 for both is attainable.
Yeah.
Top 6 requires you to be good for the entire season.
Yeah.
Like
and
consistently.
And the first month with these very, very challenging teams without Spurgeon is a pretty big deal. And that's, I'm not saying like 6 games is going to ruin the whole season, but it is a pretty big deal. So it's a good point.
We'll see how that plays out. I'm through with the hot sauce because it's my tongue is tingling right now. How many Scoville units is this? It doesn't say, but it's very spicy. So plenty of spicy takes. We'll finish by just going over some concerns and some things that we want to see this season. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild coming at you after this. When disaster strikes, there is nothing that leaves you feeling more helpless than not having access to the medical care that you need. Jase Medical is here to help give you some ease of mind by providing 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use in their Jase case. Jase Medical allows you to never be caught unprepared again, and they make the process so easy. All you do is go online, fill out a form, and then you get a prescription life-saving medication right to your door. The Jase case gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. Make sure that you head to jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON at checkout for $20 off of your life-saving antibiotics today. That's jasemedical.com. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topol and Zach Zeman wrapping up yet another successful episode. Zach, let's just talk about some concerns and some wishes for the season, and we'll just alternate. So hit me first with one thing that concerns you about this season.
It's like the defense a little bit. I think we just hit on that, but I'm going to say Marco Rossi's development this year, I will say, like, is a little concerning. Concerning in the way that I want it to be like amazing. And I think Rossi deserves this like incredibly. We all know his story. We all know what he's been through. And I think that if he doesn't get out of like whatever the heck has been going on, and if he doesn't sprout and become the Rossi that this Wild team has invested in him with, this team is going to be in trouble. The depth is going to be hindered. And I think that he's like a centerpiece of the bottom six right now. And like, if that doesn't work out, then man, it's a huge loss for this team. And that's what I'm concerned about is Rossi's huge. Like we've seen him, like he's been here forever. Can he actually develop and can he help? I mean, let's see. Let's just talk. I mean, he's got Foligno down there, Freddie Hockey down there. You got Pat Maroon with them. Like, I don't know. You got these new guys, a lot in like different. I don't know. I'm kind of like getting lost in my own train of thought here, but I think that if Rossi doesn't develop, his team is in trouble.
You're a very good. You bring up a very good concern because let's say the start of the season doesn't go according to plan for Rossi.
Yeah.
And let's say you suffer an injury to a center in your top six. Then all of a sudden you are having to pull Freddie Gaudreau into one of those spots, whether it be Hartman, whether it be Eriksson Ek. And then all of a sudden you are trying to kind of find something that's going to spark not only a third line, but then you're trying to find something that can keep the spark of another line going. If Rossi starts off and plays well and is put in a situation to have to elevate in the lineup and he takes to that and he plays well as well, that's a good problem to have because then you know that he is somebody that's capable of playing well in those situations. But if he doesn't, if it just doesn't look good to start, that's going to cause some huge problems for this team as they go. So Rossi's development is a huge concern. Huge. And so that's a great start. The one for me that I know has been mentioned, I'll mention it again. That third pairing. Starting the season with John Merrill and Kalen Addison on your third pairing.
Yeah.
I know we want to see development from Kalen, opportunity to cement himself on that top power play and to carve out a role as a defenseman on this team with consistent minutes so he's not getting benched in favor of Alex Goligoski. Obviously, those three will play to start the season, but once Jared Spurgeon is back, one of them will get bumped to the bench. If that third line starts off and is not playing well, that third pairing, I should say, you really don't have options. You really don't have options for ways to fill those spots because of salary cap limitations this year.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of one of those things where unless they make a trade, you have to just hope that they are going to kind of find their way through it, or you find a way to make it so that they're not a liability out there. And what do we know from the last two postseasons and from the regular season in general? If teams with the last change or just in the postseason in general have the opportunity to find a weakness, they will hit it again and again and again and again.
Yeah. So it's insane. I mean, this just highlights how big Spurgeon's absence means to this team. And we could also even talk about Faber. I mean, like a first pairing up there with Brodin, like talk about pressure. Like that's insane. And if he doesn't develop too, which like I hope, I mean, no, you never even know, honestly. Geez. Like there could really be some problems on the defense here. Like it could get bad. And I think like we're being like very like pessimistic with our thoughts here, but I don't know. I mean, like there's a lot of new faces. You never know what can happen. Spurgeon's gone. Like, what is that absence going to mean to this team? A lot, because he's the captain and he runs this defense. How much can Brodin do? Can Brodin, like suppress like McDavid and Draisaitl on his own? No, you got to rely on your third pairing to do that. And it's like, oh boy, there's going to be a lot of questions answered for sure. And this first month is going to be very, very tricky for this defense.
It's going to be paramount, as the kids say, to get off to a good start. Let's go with wishes. I have an interesting one because it's something that I talked about last week with another Minnesota team that is currently experiencing the joys of advancing in the postseason. My wish this season for the Minnesota Wild is that they find a way to do what the Minnesota Twins did. Maybe not to the exact same extent as the Twins, because you and I had conversations of the first half of the season. That team was unwatchable.
No, yeah.
At various points. They were not playing well at all. And then they figured it out in the second half. They played really, really well down the stretch. They have players who embraced the lack of playoff success here in Minnesota, rode out and met it head on, and vanquished it. Pablo Lopez, a couple of amazing quotes, one that will stick with me for probably the rest of my life. Pressure is privilege.
Yeah.
Having the opportunity to step up in pressure situations and perform and rise to the occasion is something that certain players love. They strive for that. They're addicted to that feeling. They can't get enough of it. But unfortunately, then there are some players that just kind of wilt in those situations.
So to tie this into Minnesota Wild, I was so down bad when Luis Arias was traded. And I think a lot of Wild fans and NHL fans in general are like not supportive of like the Foligno signing and like the Zuccarello signing. And I was so mad at the Twins for letting Luis Arias go. But now in the playoffs, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to this franchise. And I just hope, my wish this year is for Foligno to prove everyone wrong. And like, because I mean, he's clearly an essential puzzle piece to this team, regardless of the points, regardless of it. I mean, you don't even want to talk like off ice is like insane. I just hope that these signings come to fruition and like are like the Wild, like we're strained forever. And like these moves were like essential to make. What else are you going to do with the amount of money you have? You can't go out and get new guys, especially when you're down X amount of millions of dollars, thanks to Parise and Suter. I just hope the Wild prove their fan base and the NHL fan base, who are like just ripping on these new contracts. I hope they prove them wrong, because I was proved wrong by the Minnesota Twins. And I think that the Wild are in the same position to prove everyone else wrong. I think it can happen.
Very well said. You and me both are in the same position. We were both proved wrong by the local 9, as I like to call them. And we hope that the Minnesota Wild are able to take pressure as privilege and rise to the occasion this season. Now, as far as things go on the ice, we'll find out on Thursday. We've got a few more surprises for you before we get to the start of the season. So make sure that you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any content throughout the rest of the regular season. We have new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.